What is up, YouTube? Now, I'm going to be going through this JP Morgan Guide to Retirement, and I'm going to be interjecting with a little bit of my personal commentary where it's right, and highlighting some of the major type of trends that are in here. And maybe these are, I briefly went through this deck and I didn't prepare anything because I thought I'd just ad-lib it and kind of go and digest it along with you too. But before we get going, I also want to announce a few events we have coming up. Some of you guys will be coming out to Hawaii this Friday, that August 26th. Hope to see you all there. But if you're watching this later, and we will probably post this on the investor letter webpage at simplepassivecashflow.com/investor letter, where we put up a lot of these kind of market updates, which I put in this category. We also have the Napa Valley Wine Tour October 1st and the Huntsville Apartment Tours, where we're going to be doing a little celebration due to the completion of our development at Chase Creek Apartments. That'll be August 6th through the 7th. And also, the retreat for next year is January 13th to the 16th, 2023. That is the Martin Luther King 3-day weekend, and that will be in Honolulu, Hawaii. But let's get going through this. And it's semi-lengthy. I don't know how long this is going to take. I'm sure you guys can check this out on the YouTube channel later, or we'll put it on that investor letter webpage. But if you guys have any kind of questions or comments, feel free to type it into the chat below. And let's get through this. So this is supposedly their retirement equation. And I do like how they did mind map this out. So what they have here is, it's a combination of a lot of these things that are in your control and out of your control. And I'm going to say this multiple times, right? JP Morgan is one of these big institutional investment firms. They are definitely a retail type of asset managers who have their financial planners. They try to make this stuff kind of complicated to scare the crap out of you guys so that you guys just give your money blindly to some financial planner who's just going to make a bunch of commissions. Here at Simple Passive Cash Flow, we focus on investing off of Wall Street and on Main Street, mainly because we cut out all these middlemen. We get better returns. It's backed by a hard asset, get cash flow along the way, and that allows us to get all these great tax benefits that you only get from investing in real estate, to pay little to no taxes, and then implement some infinite banking strategies. If you guys want to learn more about that, go to simplepassivecashflow.com/banking. But that's kind of the tilt of this deck as I go through here. So, I think as you kind of move through financial independence, there are things you can control, things you can't control. Things you can't control, like market returns. And that's why I invest in real estate, because at the end of the day, you invest in the fundamentals, where if things go bad in the economy, people need a place to live. And it's the tech investments, the things that are kind of high asymmetric returns, are the things that bomb. Like, I think today the Dow went down 600 points or something like that. No, it doesn't happen in real estate. It doesn't really go up too fast, doesn't really go down too fast. So this is also going into like life expectancy. Everybody kind of knows that. Well, I don't know if everybody knows, but in America, the life expectancy is kind of going down a little bit. But on the long-term horizon, people are living longer and longer. Women live longer than men, which is why we typically say to get those life insurance policies up on the women. You save a little bit. It's not a huge savings. It's not a big deal. I mean, it's a lot bigger factor if you're like a smoker or not for those life insurance policies, but we can kind of help you navigate that. But I guess what this is saying is kind of breaking down, the life expectancy after reaching certain ages. Depending on where you live, what's your heritage, what you eat, that life factors and stuff like that. Living past 90 years becomes a rarity in a way. and also things that impact is, your these lifestyle choices. And, I see these as kind of the fluff part of the article. My takeaway from this, and we have clients that are, young Henrys, high income, not wealthy yet, making multiple six figures at their day job, but not yet over $1 million net worth. And we have folks in their 50s, 60s, and some 70s. Um, well, one big takeaway I've kind of noted in my notebook, in the member site, you guys have all access to that. But this phenomenon of, as the older you get, the less money you kind of need. And it kind of sounds obvious, but it's for two main reasons. First, you don't you have less unknowns, right? Like children are huge unknowns. You don't know what schools are going to be. You don't know how many kids you're going to have if you're a younger parent or not even a parent yet. And you don't know what kind of financial burden then they could be, right? They could be a druggie, and now you have to take care of them for the rest of your life. Um, if folks that are in their 60s and 70s have adult kids that are thankfully financially independent, there's a lot less variables there. And secondly, as you get to an older age, you tend to typically spend less money depending on who you are. Although we always encourage folks to like increase your lifestyle as you move along. That's why you work so hard, and that's why you get off of the road of traditional investments and get off all that crap that probably JP Morgan sells you and all these financial planners sell you, and get it onto more of alternative investments, because you can really beat that paradigm. But again, the second point is you're not going to, you got less years to kind of have your money, you drain out your money. Of course, we're always preaching, create a pile of cash to create cash flow of it, so that you're never really eating into the principal or the pile of money. For most folks, I would say that's anywhere from $3 million net worth to $5 million. Where the heck does that number come from? Well, you can kind of safely drain it at 3%, 5%, 10%, and kind of never really eat at that pile, and it never really goes down from there. They're kind of, yeah, I think these are it's a kind of a fluff slide here, but I think it is good for folks to kind of really recognize what is the difference between a real need versus a want. And I always encourage folks to create their own, ideal lifestyle at the end. Like, what are they spending money on? What are you, how much is your mortgage? Are you paying rent? And then of course, end of life needs, if you need assisted living, put it to paper and, figure out what that monthly burn rate is. And, here are some of the things that you might want to think about to add into there. For most of the clients we work with, I would say median net worth of $1.5 million, call it maybe 2 million. They make, a couple, $200,000 or $300,000 a year. They're able to save $50,000-$100,000 a year from that to put to their net worth or invest. Most of those guys are going to be financially free, meaning, well, we'll define that, I guess, since many people have different definitions of that. But financial freedom is the passive income you have from your investments are greater than your burn rate, how much money you spend. So for a lot of people, that's anywhere from like $10,000 a month to $20,000 a month. And if you hit that point, well, you don't need to work anymore. And this what totally crushes the whole paradigm of, saving and investing in these garbage 401k mutual fund type of stuff like that, and getting into alternative investments to pay less taxes. But, most people are stuck in this paradigm, or the JP Morgan asset management paradigm, where you are going to be working for a really, really long time. And this is why they put a lot of these slides in there, because for the average investor investing in traditional investments, this is definitely the paradigm you have to kind of go through. Working towards your median retirement age, with I guess is 65 or 62. Again, if you're somebody out there, $1 million net worth, making a few $100,000, and you can save $50,000-$100,000. I mean, you probably, and you're 30 years old, you probably don't need to work past 40, 45 if you don't want to. And that's kind of the last part of the, the what we teach at Simple Passive Cash Flow is like, doing something because you want, not because you have to. And a lot of times, especially like the doctors, they can go to like 2 or 3 days a week working. Whereas, some folks who it's either all or nothing, they find that they have to go find like an easier job or become a consultant. Because you guys got to do something. If not, you go crazy. But you're not doing it to trade time for money, and that's the difference from most people. Is they trade time for money. So here are some of the reasons that people cite for retiring earlier. And of course, they're just trying to scare tactic you into putting more money into their asset management scheme. But these are also good reasons. I mean, this whole report I thought was pretty great. These are all reasons that you would use as why you should probably get started investing alternative assets sooner. Health problems, caring for spouse. A lot of our folks are more in like the higher tech type of world, and that's where you have fast quick changes in industry, company downsizing when somebody's job is outsourced out. And then some people, they just don't like to work for the man, and they just want to do something different. Here's a percentages of household with a pension. If you're a Gen Xer or younger, you're probably like, what the heck is a pension? You know what I mean? I got to stick at a job for more than 5 years to get something like that. I think most of you guys watching this video right now would all agree that ain't no pension no more. And then secondly, Social Security. So I don't know where this changed, but I feel like for a lot of folks, Gen X or younger, there may be some Social Security, but this is kind of one of the biggest scams out there because you put your money, they kind of take your money forcingly from your paycheck. And if you break it down, how much is the benefit at the end of it? I mean, this is the same case with the pensions. Break it down. What are the numbers? It's usually a pretty paltry return. If if you would have put your money into something making 10%, you probably would have done a heck of a lot better. But this is where people, they kind of brainwash a lot of people to think that by putting money into Social Security or paying your time for the pension, you're putting your money and it's growing over time. Yes, it's growing over time, but inflation is probably kicking its butt. Now, for most people out there who are really bad managing their money, they just spend more than they make. I guess this stuff could make sense because this kind of prevents people from getting their grubby hands on their money and spending it willy-nilly. But for a lot of us in our Simple Passive Cash Flow tribe, and like I said, you guys need to come to events and meet the other folks because we are a koopy group of people, right? We're the ones who would max out our 401ks and save a lot of money, very frugal with our money. For a lot of us, the operating system changes from this very debt adverse Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman, pay everything down, pay off debt, to using debt effectively, seemingly in a more of aggressive strategy. But when you start to understand how money really works and how debt really works, and focusing on good debt service coverage ratios in your investment where it's backed by cash flow and a hard asset, and it's really not that too outlandish of a type of investment strategy at the end of the day. But you need people around you, right? You can't just sit at your computer all day long. You got to meet other people, and it really is a relationship game. But for the 99.99% of people who are just unwilling to do anything, they just wear their boxers at their computers all day long. That's what all these large financial institutions and financial planners are for, to cater to. But I'm sure you guys are savvy enough to know what you guys get when you do that. I tried to work through this little flow chart for claiming Social Security. This is like, your person at your office who's like probably should retire and should have retired a long time ago, but maybe they don't have any hobbies and it's just there just to, take up space. They're like a professional at like navigating this little flow chart on when you should take your Social Security. But to me, if you're counting on Social Security to happen, you probably did it all wrong. Because again, the Social Security, like when you calculate the ROI, I mean, it's probably low single digits is probably what you're getting at the end of the day. But essentially, right, like people, the 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 way the numbers work, the longer you delay gratification or you retire at the end, the more monthly payout you're going to get. And yeah, numbers, when you look at it, it does look very enticing to keep working to your 70, except for the fact confirmed by actuary tables saying that you will likely die. And that's why they do that type of deal where they keep changing these ages around and they reward delaying gratification. I say, like it's just me and like retirement accounts, solo 401ks, 401ks, Roth IRAs. To me, I have a lot of good reasons why I don't do them, and I don't have to worry about all these stupid rules of control. And who knows, and worry every 2 years when Congress wants to change something and kind of screw over the millions of Americans using some kind of retirement, so-called tax advantage fund as their vehicle for investing. So we're not going to spend too much time on that. And we're not going to spend too much time on this because, when you do things like invest in good deals backed by, a hard asset, you don't pay too much taxes because those investments give you good losses and depreciation, and you do a little bit of infinite banking, you're done. You can be retired in like a decade or less. And you don't have to deal with all these government entitlement programs that are quite honestly like not a very good deal when you look at the numbers. But I kind of study this a little bit just so I'm kind of aware that's happening out there. But and I do admit that this document that got put together by JP Morgan is pretty solid, if the audience is actually relying on this type of stuff like Social Security. I always like these types of charts, or I used to like them when I was just kind of operating my own bubble. Because I think a lot of people they think, well, I want to have I don't know how much I'm saving because most of my friends don't know. Oh yeah, I like these comments you guys do, but Daddy Government knows better than we do apparently. Yes, they do apparently. Um, yeah, definitely don't pay towards Social Security pension if you don't have to, but they force you to. You can do like get a job where you get paid via 1099 and kind of funnel some of the money around the self-employment tax and that type of stuff to get out of that silly thing, and pay less taxes. But a lot of those tax strategies to me are kind of checkers where we're playing chess by making more passive income so we can drive that down to zero with the passive losses in real estate, and eventually over time make little to no ordinary income and make it mostly passive income so you don't pay taxes, period. But anyway, back to this report. I mean, I guess like if you guys are still doing it the traditional way, these numbers would be a cool way to kind of measure yourself against other people. But I think this is why like we do the events with our group, because it's so hard to find people that have more than $1 million or $2 million net worth who's willing to talk about their finances and being transparent with other people, often strangers. Not from an ego standpoint, but from really learning from each other and doing these alternative investing type of practices and measuring yourself somehow in terms of net worth and cash flow and investments and quarterly distributions and stuff like that. Whereas most people, they just operate in their bubble. They don't know anybody. Most people would rather talk about sex with their friends than their partner, not their friends, but their partner, I guess, maybe their friends, than talk about finances. And I think that's why, these guys put together this kind of cool chart here to kind of, tell you, hey, you're screwing up, man. You don't have enough savings. There was a book a long time ago I read that I think it was maybe The Millionaire Next Door, which I think was kind of a silly book because it just teaches you to be really lame and frugal with your money, which I definitely am not a believer in. I'm more of a believer of maximizing your investments so you can maximize the enjoyment of your life than to be a lame Toyota driver. And sorry if I offend you for being a Toyota driver, but if you actually invested your money, you could probably buy a dozen Lexuses if you really wanted to. Although you probably just buy one. But these numbers, they kind of tell you that if you're on track or not. And just like I think in that book they had this simple formula of take your age times a certain number, and it was like obviously a linear growing line, or maybe it had some kind of a hockey stick curve to it. But it basically says, well, if you're below this line, you better get your shit together, man, because you're like behind the curve. And if you're on this line or above, you're doing pretty good, right? I mean, we have some clients that make 300, $400,000 and they save $200,000 a year, and their net worth is already $2, $3 million. And for those people, I'm like, well, maybe one of you guys should just stop working, because you guys are good. You've gotten to critical mass, or you're getting there. You're over the hump, and you don't really need to really trade time for money as aggressively. Where some people I talk to are on the other end. These are mostly the non-accredited investors that have less than, they might have a $500,000 net worth. They make, combined household income of 150,000, and they save 20 grand. And I'm kind of like, I'm kind of the jerk that tells them, you guys got to get it in gear, right? You guys are probably doing a heck of a lot better than all your friends, your closest friend circle. But in the whole grand scheme of things, like, you're not going to get to what your goals are in that case. And then I think that's where, by meeting other people on this path that have this kind of viewpoint, you start to figure out where you fit in it. And it may be motivating to you. And it can also be like, all right, like we better, like, we're doing pretty good, right? Lane's got a group of 40 accredited investors in this room, and from what we hear, we're doing pretty good, and we should probably spend our money a little bit for time and enjoyment out of life, because who knows, you might just die tomorrow. And that kind of, this whole report is a little morbid too, like that, so it kind of fits the theme. And so this chart is talking about income replacement needs vary with household income. So this is what's basically saying that, traditionally what happens when people make more money is they have a higher burn rate. They have a higher spend rate. I see all kinds of financial profiles, and I would probably agree, like people making $600,000 a year, there's typically a doctor in there. They spend a lot. A lot of times a spendthrift spouse, and they just are keeping up with the Joneses, and they may spend 400, 450 a year and barely save any of it. And you compare them with a family of, an engineer and a teacher making $200,000 a year, and they seem to do just as fine spending $150,000 a year. So the other couple's spending three times that other couple. At the end of the day, it's all about what you save and what you invest. And then kind of where I come in, and is, I have a whole bunch of data points based in my head from all of these other past clients. I can kind of tell you based on past experience with those people where it's going to end up, and kind of my journey too. But this is also taking into account the Social Security benefit, which I would say just throw that out the window. The way I look at it is, if that comes, it comes. That's your beer money, I guess. And here's kind of that sad. They've been using this since the beginning of time to scare you into putting money into your 401k when you start employment. They got rid of the guy's name, but it used to be like they compare a guy Sam and Kyle, and they're basically saying, well, Sam saved his money and he did a good job, and he's set, and look how magically his money is going to grow. But Kyle was a screw off till he was 35, and then he finally started putting into his retirement, and he did it 2 times as much as Sam, but just with the power of time is money, the time value of money, like he just wasn't able to beat his buddy there, Sam. And I think that, like, this is we teach people all these strategies, but at the end of the day, if I look at the people who were over 2.5 million net worth, well on their way over the hump, if I call it, maybe not to end game yet, which is again 4 to 5 million net worth plus. I would say that the commonality is, people spending 5 to 10 years saving 50 to $100,000 every single year, and of course investing that. But there is that incubation, that grit stage that people need to go through where it just requires time. Personally, when I was like 23 to about 30, I mean, I was saving like $100,000 a year. I didn't live anywhere for a handful of years. I didn't pay any rent or mortgage. And that's what really set me up to be in my 30s. And like for most of our clients are in their mid 40s, and a lot of those guys, they were really good with their money. They bought a house to live in their 20s, and they kind of just sat on it as they had kids and life got really busy. But then they wake up in their late 30s, early 40s, and now they have $1.5 million. So that time worked on their side. But I'm always like, wow, like if you would have went into that tunnel, right, that sleep for 5 to 10 years, and you would have been growing your money a little bit faster and not paying a lot less taxes due to the investments you're investing in, man, you probably should have been at 2.5, 3.5 million when you woke up from your little sleep there, Rip Van Winkle. And man, we could be really moving at this point. But part of it is, like I'm saying, time is a big factor, but also what direction or what you're investing is the second. And we all know what's going to happen if you invest in retail investments that's in the stock market or your garbage financial planner stuff. But that's why I guess the whole point is like, don't discount the old good old fashioned just saving your money from your paycheck, like being able to save 50, $100,000 a year. Here's a little bit of a news, like they kind of put in here like average savings rates, and I don't know where they get this data. I'm always a little skeptic that these numbers are kind of skewed. As we all know, like the GDP numbers or the inflation numbers are always cooked, right? They're like, now they don't even include like food and oil and gas now, which to me is befuddles me. But anyway, um, right now, because of after the pandemic, the savings rate is actually pretty good. And there's a lot of actually good like news about the economy that for some reason that the big general news sources aren't reporting. I mean, if you guys are really interested, shoot us an email. I can send you a report that I personally read every month that has a bunch of economic data. And if you're not, well, just stay away from the fear porn out there on YouTube and Yahoo Finance and CNBC and NBC and all those types of things. But right now, like historical average savings rate, we're definitely higher. So this is a good thing for households. We're definitely not in that 2008 situation where people barely had any savings. Oh no, I guess I was wrong. Here they have that Sam and Kyle scenario, but I guess they changed their names, and they added some girls. Go figure. And they also added some categorizing consistent Chloe, late Lyle, quitter Quincy, and nervous Noah. Yeah. Apparently the girl wins in this situation because she started early. But anyway, like, this is kind of a good graphical viewpoint on what that happened. What's not showed here is I want to know what percent IR or average investment growth that these guys got per year. Likely they're doing which is different from their average growth of $200 invested saved monthly. That's just a mere $2,400 a month. So most of the folks in our group, they're saving like 50, 100 grand a year. So I think that is, I don't know, what, 10x this or 20x that. $2,400 a year. Which is why, the net worth of most of you guys, and, by the time you're 50, 55, are not $200,000 like how, consistent Chloe is here. Well, it's consistent because she's investing in garbage. But if she would actually be making a pretty way better salary and she was investing more, it'd probably be like, yeah, it would be probably be 10x that. Probably be $2 million. And that's exactly right. Like, that's kind of an average client that we have. They save $50 to $100,000, which is 10 to 20 times this example. And by the time they're 50, their typical net worth is like a couple mil plus. But the other thing is, like, what is the growth of these curves? Normally, when they show these types of things, and I'm gonna kind of cheat over, I guess they don't have it. They're usually using like 8%, maybe 10%. But I tell people, well, just for kicks, just plug in 12%, 14%, 16%, and just see what the possibilities could be. Now here, we're talking about the retirement accounts, such as the 401ks, the IRAs, the Roths, which to me are just, well, I don't like it. I guess I'll go over it here, right? Like, here's the thing. All those things are just delaying your taxes in the future. I'm operating off of this idea that my tax bracket is going to be a lot higher in the future. Why? Because in the future, I'm going to have a lot more money and a lot more income. And also, where this country is going, the taxes are going to be going up. So my conclusion is I would like to pay my taxes on my money today and get it out of one of these deferred programs. But don't let the government, the government wants you to put your money in this stuff so they can tax you where the heck they want in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. That's the vindicative way of looking at it. The reason why they do it too is because when it's in these programs, it's kind of illiquid to most people to get their grubby hands on their money. And the government needs people to take, be not in power, but actually take like their own like responsibility in their own hands, because the government can't afford all the healthcare and all like the end of days care for regular people. And especially the last 10, 20 years of retirement when they're done working. So that's why, and especially like the pensions aren't being, fulfilled these days. Companies don't really have pensions. So that's why the creation of the 401ks, IRAs, that type of stuff happened. But again, this is a different paradigm shift with us. We don't have to worry about, well, some of us have to just be aware of it. Like, myself included, if I get money, I'm going to go on and do something with it. Typically, it's investing with it or putting it into my infinite banking. But, I would say, like, it's good that it's put somewhere, but here are the downsides of putting your money into this type of stuff. When you put your money in here and you invest in real estate, you don't get the tax benefits that you do from the real estate because it's insulated in one of these types of programs, these tax deferred things. So that's the whole reason why I like to invest in real estate too, is because it gives me all these great losses. So it allows me to play different games on my taxes to drive down my income if I so choose to. I have those weapons or levers or whatever you want to call it at my disposal because I invest cash and I don't invest through one of these insulated retirement programs. And this is all new to you guys. I wrote this out in an article, and there's other videos on this at simplepassivecashflow.com/QRP. But here what they're doing is they're kind of showing you that, yeah, you should put your money into this stuff, because I don't know if this is true, but I feel like these asset management companies got in cahoots by the government to lobby for these types of things. And now they're able to tap the American population's, the common man's like portfolio at that point with this thing called a mutual fund. In similar fashion, like, just like the Roths, IRAs, there are things called health savings accounts. They are, I would say they're a little bit better than your run-of-the-mill retirement account, such as the ones I mentioned. Because when you spend the money on health stuff, you can get the tax break there. And with health, it's not like if you're going to be using the expenses, you will. And so like I've had to explain to me one time where, you never know if you're going to retire. You probably good chance you may die before even heading to retirement. And therefore you need to spend money on your health care or use up your HSA first. So if you're going to do one of them, do the HSA first, which is what nobody does, of course, right? Everything's all ass backwards how everybody does it. But I used to have an HSA. I personally don't. The reason why is like you're kind of limited to putting in like small amounts, like 6 grand a year, and it just takes forever to get a sizable amount in there. I mean, it's gonna take you like what is that, 10 years to get 60 grand. And then at that point, you can actually put it into some kind of private placement. It's just at that 10 years, you're gonna be wasting your time. And that's for me was why in my head, I thought that it just didn't make sense for me. Now I know a lot of people who are kind of advanced with this stuff. What they'll do is really clever things, like they'll put an asset and they'll say that it's worth less, and then magically, when the development's done, it's worth way more. And that's how they overstuff their Roth IRAs or the health savings accounts. I am a little weary about that. And since I'm always the general partner, that's considered self-dealing, or I'm not like a passive investor at that point. If I was a passive investor, I might consider it, but I still like, I don't know. It just, to me, it just doesn't seem right. I mean, I guess it does, but I've just tried to keep things simple and just always just invest cash and have the passive losses to mitigate my taxes today. As I said, it's like a time value of money thing. But of course, the traditional way of investing is always, IRAs, solo 401k, or I guess not solo 401ks, but like, the retirement accounts, Roth IRAs, and then HSAs for your health stuff. And then also similar fashion, like the 529 plans. Now, those are complete garbage because unlike the HSAs, where you can get the tax benefit with health stuff, the 529s, you have an even worse set of options to invest with. And that's why these companies like you to do these kinds of things, because you're stuck within this cafeteria of garbage options. When you have cash, you can invest in whatever you'd like, such as real estate. But, by promoting these types of things like this 529 plan, you're just limited to garbage options. But for most people, they're going to just eat the garbage, I guess, just like McDonald's or Burger King or whatever these days. Diversified sources of retirement funding. Yeah, so what they're saying here is like, you should have a diversified fund of all these accounts. And oh, by the way, we want you to do that because you're stuck investing in our crap, right? Um, and it all depends, right? And here's kind of my general I'm not a CPA, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not giving you tax or legal or financial advice, guys. You gotta be silly. But if it were me, if I was making less than $340,000 a year in adjusted gross income, and that's not many people, if I was making less than that, you're not paying that much taxes, and I wouldn't really implement any of these health savings account, Roth IRA, IRA. I wouldn't implement any of those, and I would invest cash. Really, I think any of those tax deferred accounts only make sense if you make more than $340,000 adjusted gross income and you have a lot of money in there already because, you're in your 40s and 50s and you were kind of brainwashed to put all your money in there in the first place. And now you come to us and we kind of teach you these types of things and you're screwed. And if you take money out of there and you leak it out, you take $100,000 out of there and your adjusted gross income is 400, it's going to go up to 500 and you're already kind of in that higher tax bracket. So it's just kind of like, shoot, what do I do? Right. And then it gets kind of complicated and, every situation is different. But, that would be the only situation. Again, you're a pretty high income earner over 340,000 for married fellow couple. You single guys are kind of screwed. I think it's like 150,000. and you have a substantial amount in those accounts. And when I mean that's substantial, I'm talking, on the low side, 500 grand, but definitely more than $1 million in there. Um, a prosperous one. I don't really know what they're saying here. I guess what they're saying here, like, we all go through these different phases in life. Maybe on the bottom is the years. Yeah, I don't know what the bottom. I'm guessing the bottom is like how old you are. Span, and I guess before age 75, they're just kind of saying, well, you're kind of still in money making mode. And then you kind of go into the slowing passive phase where you're kind of spending less. But then at some point, when you break your hip in the shower or you get dementia, your healthcare skyrockets. And I'll just say that this whole slide should be very morbid to everybody because the first thing I'll call out here is like what they're saying is when you get older, you're going to kind of shrivel up and just do less, we all know those people who like are kind of so-called minimalists, right? Well, they're minimalists because they're broke and they can't do jack, right? I'm kind of a minimalist, but I like to do shit, right? I like to go out and experience things and live a life that I feel like I'm only get to live once. So my spend would increase up this way, where this is to me is a very pessimistic view, but this is the way we're all taught, right? This is why they say, oh, you should put your money into a retirement account because when you take it out, you'll be making less money. So then the tax brackets will be different. And that's the key difference is like, I've got more of an optimistic point of view where when we are in our retirement age, we should be making more money because our passive investments are growing like a hockey stick and it's kicking off more and more income for us. Therefore, should be in a higher tax bracket. But for most people, they don't do that, right? So that's why they're kind of this shrivel up and dying and going down like that. But this is, I think, a sad part. And for people who have to take care of their older parents, they know this to be a fact. This healthcare kind of skyrockets, and that's just the people in our community. Like out of a family of a couple kids, the people who kind of follow what we do are typically the ones that have their financial shit together and have to take care of the parents, where the other kids aren't. This kind of breaks that last slide down. This is really more simplistic, but proves a point. This is kind of how they break it down per category of spend. Let me see. How can I read this? I mean, healthcare obviously goes up over time. The housing. Now, the housing is in the beginning, and then people tend to downsize because the kids move out. I don't know what's really going on here where it kind of skyrockets here. Maybe the kids are moving in with the parents. I don't know. I know that happens in Hawaii, but I don't know if it would happen on a national scale. I don't know what's really going on there. Obviously, education phases out at some point, and then food and beverage typically stays the same and decreases over time, which is, I guess, people eat less. That's probably true. Transportation, a lot of this is in their working years. You're commuting to work every day. Who knows what this other one? This other one is actually a pretty large category. Entertainment, apparel, and travel. This is a sad part. Like their travel is going way down. I would say this travel and entertainment one should get bigger. I mean, this is what I would want for all our clients is when you get to this point, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and you spend more money on it. But hey, who am I to judge? I don't judge nobody. Apparently everybody judges people on YouTube anyway, but I guess you got choices, right? If you got money, you got choices. It's kind of a same slide here, and then I'll just point out this is people with investable wealth of $1 to $3 million. So the breakdown here, we're not talking about broke guys in the study. spending and inflation, right now you can't just do nothing. You're losing like 10% every year. Um, but I think maybe some people it doesn't hit hard for some people because some people, and I would probably put myself in this category. I like to look up my online banking and see how much money I have. Like how Scrooge McDuck likes to count his money. If Scrooge McDuck had online banking back then, he wouldn't need to go swimming through his bank of gold coins. But I think strange as it is, I think a lot of us are kind of like that, where we want to just see our money in our, that number. But when you do that, you don't really understand and you're not thinking relatively in terms of buying power. And that's where inflation insidiously robs you of your wealth over time. Sure, you may have $1.1 million in there, and next, because you have some good, savings accounts, or you do infinite banking where it goes up 5% every year, you'll have 1.15 and then 1.2 the next year. But in reality, you lost buying power, and that's really all that really matters. You're still doing more better than most of your friends, right? Probably, I guess you could make the argument of that. So it's kind of saying where inflation is kicking people's butts, and from where I'm reading it, it's really in the transportation side. I don't know if that coincides with oil and gas costs. I know, like one anecdote there is like like a Honda Civic. It's not the greatest of cars, but the things cost like 30, 35 grand these days. Yeah, this is the 4% rule, and we've talked about this in our inner circle group. Where do we get this $4 to $5 million net worth goal or end game? Well, at $4 to $5 million, using this 4% rule, you can have a pretty comfortable life at $10 to $20,000 of passive income every month. 4% is a pretty crappy rate of return, but the whole point is you're okay making a crappy rate of return in the end game because you just don't want to worry about it. And um, now I don't, from what I see, some people will keep their pedal to the metal and keep making 10, 15, 20% a year in their investments. But I think the whole point is the option to, like, even a dummy can make 4%, I guess is what they're saying. And I guess it's what they're saying here for the general public. So I guess my quote of the general dummy should be able to make 4%, and this is why they use that's why it's a 4% rule. So here, maybe like sometimes it's good to understand what the end game is for you. So like if you're like, all right, I've created a budget of what I want our ideal lifestyle to be in 10 years or 15 years, and it's $15,000 of $16,000 a month. So I times that by two. That's $192,000 um, a year of passive income. So the magic formula is to divide it by 0.04, and you come up with $4.8 million. So that's what you need to have actively working for you at 4% to create that lifestyle, that $192,000 of income annually. Of course, your investment should go up with the pace of inflation, right? That's why we kind of some smarty is always asking, well, what about inflation? Well, if your money's invested in things that go up with the pace of inflation, that $192,000 of income per year should go up with the pace of inflation year after year after year, right? And that's even more reason why you need to be in the game. You need to be in things that kind of go up and down with the pace of inflation. Certainly, and this is, I think, where the poor get poorer because they don't invest in things that go up and down with the pace of inflation. They are always just kind of left behind. When things are good and things are growing like crazy, they miss out on it. And when inflation's coming and taking everybody's money away, the people who have money in the game, like in real estate, their money is just, they're kind of on that, the river raft, the rescue boat in a way. Here's this age-old concept called the dollar cost averaging, right? This explains the whole like, and like today, like the market went down 600 points, right? What does the financial planner always say? Well, you got to have that long vision, and then you call them up, and or like when things are okay and you're actually trying to calculate what the heck was my average annual return every year, and you realize it was a lot less than 10%, even though they said it was being 10% or more. Then you start kind of realize how the numbers are all kind of cooked. But this is where they're like, well, you have to consistently put in money, and I would agree with this whole thing too, right? Like, I mean, whether it's alternative investments or traditional investments, you got to constantly putting more money into there to kind of hit. Like not like the other slide, we're just putting in a paltry $2,400 a year. That ain't going to get you anywhere. $200 a month. That's going to get you to $300,000 in retirement. That's nowhere near enough. But most of our folks are doing $50,000 to $100,000 a year at least into investments. But the thing is, it doesn't take that long for you to do that, to get yourself to be able to get on the path or get to escape velocity. If you think of it in terms of breaking out of the Earth's atmosphere and going 0G. This is actually an interesting concept, but I don't know if again, this is the first time I'm reading a lot of these slides, but mitigating dollar cost ravaging with dynamic spending. Maybe they're saying that, if your investments do good, then you take out a little bit more. But I think what we're seeing here is we're seeing like a person with a net worth or assets in the game of $1 million. This is why we say like you got to get to 4 or 5 million, even if you're doing alternative assets with 10, 20% returns. Like you got to have that big principal for it to kick off money, so you don't eat through your principal amount. So if you don't have that much, like in this case, $1 million investing in traditional investments, then you're gonna have to do all this nonsense stuff like dollar cost ravaging. But my whole thing is like, dude, just keep it simple. You still need to invest. You need to grow your money. You need to make more money. Get your net worth to 4 or 5 mil plus. Simple passive cash flow. Healthcare costs for retiring before age 65. So I would say like most people who are, just a couple, no kids, $1,000 a month and with a family, maybe a couple grand a month for healthcare. That probably will go up. Who knows? It might go down. Right? We never know what happens in Congress if they kind of have the government flip that bill for everybody. Market plan costs usually increase with age. Still at age 64, it's still sort of under control. And this is where it's like, you guys know this is happening. It's not like jumping leaps and bounds, but if you have your money growing with the pace of inflation, by the time you're 64, your investment should more than account for this. Like I said, if you're 64 here and you're spending, let's just say $2,000 a month on this healthcare, $2,000 a month times 12. So that would be a cost of $24,000 a month. At a 0.4, if I divide it by 0.04, which is like the crappiest rate of return you could possibly do, as long as you have $600,000 working at 4%, you can fund that healthcare, and it'll go up with the pace of inflation as the healthcare goes up. So this is a concept of like piecemealing all your retirement expenses. So I've also given an example where maybe somebody wants to like have some, like they want to get a massage every week, right? It's $100 times 4, one every Friday or whatever. So that's $400 a month times 12. That's $4,800 a year. 0.04 4,800 divided by 0.04. If you have 120 grand working for you, you don't need to pay for all that stuff. That money working harder for you. Even more whimsical, and just to prove the example, let's just say you have a strange habit of getting a boba every day or Starbucks. So $5 times 5 days a week, $25 a week times 4, $100 a month is what you spend money on this. You probably shouldn't be eating all that sugar anyway. So times 12, so that's a $1,200 bad habit every year, or call it cigarettes, although I don't think cigarettes cost $5 anymore. But you divide that by 0.04, and you just need to have 30 grand working for you, and you can pay for that habit for the rest of your life. But here's the cool thing: instead of using that rule of 4, the 0.04, and went $1,200 divided by 0.15, assuming like a 15% rate of return, all you got to have is $8,000 working at 15% to satisfy that sugar tooth every single day. So obviously, it's a whimsical example, but it can be used to kind of piece together your entire retirement, all the things you want. Do another example. So say I want to have a mortgage of $5,000 times 12, so that I'm spending 60 grand on my housing every year. But it's like my dream house, of course, right? How much money would I need to have working at 0.4%? You would need $1.5 million to satisfy that dream house for the rest of your life. Of course, the cool thing is you'll probably pay off the mortgage at some point. But what if you went $60,000 a year divided by 0.15 at 15%? You only need 400 grand working for you at 15%. And now you've paid for that and move on. Now you move on to the Lamborghini, right? Let me see where this is going. I'm not going to talk too much about this Medicare stuff, which, by the way, if you drive your MAG under 100 grand, it's free healthcare for you, says the government. But yeah, they're trying to scare you, right? And I think the one thing that is scary, it's not so much the premiums as I mentioned here, but it's the end of days care, like assisted living. It's not going to cost $2,000 a year or a month. It's going to cost 10x that per month. Yeah, so exactly that. The long-term care planning, that it adds up over time, and that's why you've got to kind of run through the finish line here if you're still in your 40s and 50s, and get that net worth up so you can absorb this should this happen. I guess they're saying providers of so the elders, like, of course, most people are really bad with their money, right? Including elders. They're saying that the people who are paying this stuff is 51% is their younger generation, their adult children paying for it. 27% other family, 23% non-relatives. I wonder who that is. So that's kind of a sad fact. Yeah, it's the younger generation flipping the bill for their parents. I think we got several more slides here, and this is a kind of a no-brainer slide, right? The older you get, disability incidences increase with age. So 80 to 84, 1 every 5, and with 85 to 89, 30% chance. If you're living past 90, you flip a coin and the person's disabled at this point, if they're still alive. So again, it's like, it's not if you need the healthcare stuff, it's when. Kind of makes me want to maybe fund the HSA, but then again, that stuff just grows too slow, like how I said, or you can compile it so slowly. I'm just gonna go grow my money a lot. Some people, what they'll do is they'll move to lower cost areas like the old California to Arizona or California to Texas or Florida. That's a very classic move. Although some of these more like these coastal states, they may have government entitlement programs where if you are old, maybe the government will pay for it. I don't think that that's the case now, but who knows what the heck will happen in the future. I don't have any good advice. Actually, I'm not supposed to give advice. Forget I said that. I don't have any best practices or see people for the long-term insurance options. I have it built into my life insurance, my infinite banking as kind of like a side benefit that if I did happen to get disabled, it would kick in. I think it is long-term care. So I am kind of covered that, and it's kind of a byproduct of my whole life infinite banking. So here's a slide I don't like. They're saying like, short-term goals, medium-term goals, long-term goals, and they're telling you should do equities or X amount of equities or bonds. Now, in the alternative investing world, or especially if you come out to some of our events and you meet some other sophisticated investors, a lot of times these things kind of get thrown out the window, and it's not really a mix of equities or bonds, but it's more traditional investments versus alternative investments, and then the traditional investments is broken up of equities and bonds. I think obviously, the institutions, they want you to have 100% of traditional investments, which are equities and bonds. But, in our world, if you talk to, a dozen people, you're going to get answers all over the bat. I have no equities or bonds and I'm still alive, right? They haven't come to my house and called me off. Some people, they want to have 20% alternate investments. Some people 80% alternate investments. Like there's no normal. And I think this is where some people can feel really uncomfortable with this because they want to follow the, at Google. If you Google, just Google it, like how you guys are maybe at home. Asset allocation mix suggestions. See what Google comes up with, and you look at the images and you look at all these like really cool pie charts where like it looks like 7% domestic stocks, 8% foreign stocks, and like why is it 1% more, and then 35% REITs, precious metals, bonds, or and then they'll have like different names, and it's like this is the conservative, well this is the balance, this is the moderate growth, like these. And well, when they do that, what they're doing is they're like, well, you can get our fund 1 to do this, our fund 2 to do this, our fund 3 to do this. And that's why they do what they do. That's why they have these large buildings and have all this marketing budget. So this is actually a really good slide not for the reasons that they use it, but what they're saying here, or I don't know what they're saying here, but I'm probably gonna make a slide with this over the time, but here's my whole concept of how you should like allocate your money in what vehicles, not saying what you should invest in, but what vehicles you should put in first, and then fill up that bucket and then put it into the next, and fill up that bucket and fill it into the next one. So what's the first bucket? Well, the first bucket is today cash flow. So that's, for most people, is just getting $5,000 to $10,000 of passive cash flow today so that they can possibly quit their day job or see the light at the end of the tunnel. Then get up to that $10,000, $20,000 bucket, or get it up to that amount. Now, after that point, for most people, especially in our group, they don't buy the Lamborghini or Ferrari, even though I joke about it all the time. At that point, again, I'm not giving any financial advice because I'm not a financial planner who has license to sell you commission products such as those, but because I don't have them, so I wouldn't be able to speak from experience. But like at that point, then I would say you would look to put money into these vehicles such as an IRA or Roth IRA or HSA or even like a nonprofit company that you own, because you're not going to use the cash flow from those investments for your life. It's going to be more legacy wealth for hopefully the next many, many generations. Although 90% of wealth leaves families in 2 or 3 generations because they don't teach the kids any of this type of stuff. But it's this whole concept of like, get today's buckets filled first, invest cash, then start to fill up these tax deferred accounts, etc. Um, but as you can see, the financial planning world has all got it all backwards, where they say put your money in those tax deferred accounts first, because once you got it in there, you're stuck with them. That's why they do it. But I always think like, create today's cash flow today first, then go fill up the other bucket, or maybe just skip right over all the IRAs and stuff like Roths straight to the nonprofit, and just put it into an irrevocable trust and just load it into the cloud. Problem there is you don't have control over it, and although if you're clever enough, you can still get personal benefit from those type of things as you as the beneficiary. But it's kind of that this whole concept of, I mean, here they talk about it as stable spending, then the next one is the variable spending. So that's stable spending, I would say, is like, your basic necessities for most people, $5,000 to $10,000 a month. Your variable spending is now we're getting some nice vacations, your Caymus wine every other day. This is a good lifestyle. After that, I mean, depends how much like you're into gluttony and flying first class. I mean, I guess variable spending, you're already flying first class everywhere anyway. At that point, what are you gonna do? Buy a private jet? I mean, that's cool and everything, but I would think at that point, that's where most people would divert those additional returns and net worth growth to more legacy investments after that. So I don't know why. I don't know what their point of putting these 2 slides in there, but I really, really like this because it helps me explain my other 2 concepts. So yeah, here's the different paths, right? Once you you get to retirement, and I'm gonna totally argue with them that retirement has nothing to do with age. I don't care how old you are. It depends what your net worth is. Once you hit a certain net worth, to me, you are retired. I talk to a lot of 20, 30-year-olds who have a lot more money than people in their 70s and 80s. Age has nothing to do with it. Net worth is the score at the end of the day, or even in the beginning of your retirement in your 30s or 40s. So once you hit this retirement, which I define as, let's call it 4 or 5 million net worth, you have a few paths. So that one of those paths can mean continue to put the pedal to the metal, increase your net worth. This would mean continuing to investing in, growth stocks or alternative assets that are value add, and, keep making 10, 15, 20, 30% plus. Another one is kind of having a mixed strategy. And then the other one as well, the light blue one here would be that 4% rule. Just put it into life insurance and let it ride at 4 or 5% tax free. And then, there's different layers to this. And obviously you're going to combine some investments from the growth ones with, some that are more conservative. Like I would say out of my portfolio, I would say 20% is life insurance that is really conservative. But I combo that with some developments, right? And at the end of the day, my trajectory is somewhere in the middle. So your investment strategy is going to be a composite of all your portfolio. And here's the one where they scare you to like, don't get out of the market, even though you saw it drop 600 points today. Just stay in there, because if you missed the best 10 days because you got cold feet, which typically happens right after a correction, this is the doom and gloom of what happens. But I personally don't have any stocks, so I don't really live this life. I don't really care what happens in the Dow or the S&P 500. I invest in real estate because it doesn't just go up and down. On the opposite side of this, the more crazy lifestyle, check it 24/7, because the markets don't close. It's the crypto stuff. That stuff is open all the time. I mean, if you're somebody who's wired up and has no life and likes to watch that stuff and freak out about every little thing, then be my guest. But personally, I couldn't even really handle the stock market stuff that was only open 5 days a week. Um, and that's why I've gravitated towards a slow moving asset that I can invest in things that have fundamental usage to workforce housing. People need a place to live in a country where the population going up, or even if the population was flatlining. The majority of the population is this lower middle class, and that demand is getting more and more and more. Here, they're comparing different 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs, health savings accounts. Their evaluations are probably accurate, but some things they're not really. They kind of fitting a triangle rod through a square hole. Sorry for the analogy, but my daughter plays with those types of toys right now. She's like 1, so um, some of them don't really apply, I think, in this chart. But my whole thing is for most people, don't even deal with this stuff. Like invest cash into real assets and don't get tricked into going into these types of vehicles, because when you go into these types of vehicles, you're going to go to the places that the driver takes you, and it's not you driving. A lot of times it's these asset management companies with their portfolios of their mutual funds, and they're the ones driving, and they're going to take you to whatever party they want to take you to. So that's why I say don't get into these vehicles, because then you're going to get stuck investing in all their garbage. But if you guys have that type of stuff, I would say these slides would actually be pretty useful to you. Even though I don't agree with it at all. Oh, here's Sam, Super Sam, Escalating Ethan, and Stubborn Sarah. So this is the whole concept of as your lifestyle, as you get paid more and more at work, it typically happens because it's inflation, number one, and technically you should be getting better at your job, getting pay raises, or at least the people in the higher positions are retiring and getting out of your way. And you should be getting paid more, so therefore, you put more to investments. So, $50,000 to $100,000 a year is what most of our folks are doing as their pay increases. If you follow this, and I would say it's a good general rule, you should be increasing the amount that you save. But again, for most of our folks, like, if they get their net worth to 2 million, they're kind of over that hump already. And a lot of times they don't need to keep saving $100,000 plus a year. And this is where I usually can kind of get a good feeling, and I steer them towards quality of life choices, as opposed to just save, because that's what your parents taught you. And if not, you're a sinner and you're going to go to a bad place because you don't save all your money. And this kind of speaks to our kind of group's mentality. A lot of type A individuals, a lot of like overachievers, and they're just too good for their own, like well-being. They grind too hard and they save too much money. And if you're somebody who was saving $150,000, you've gotten your net worth to $3 million. Now's the time to kind of be a little bit more like enjoying things, work less. A lot of times what I see is like people's taxes, like they're just not doing the right tax moves because their CPA suck. Because CPA, the CPA just has a job, right? Their job is to do your tax forms and not really strategy. Like I say, you never take financial advice from someone who's not financially free. And a lot of those CPA guys, they just still work in their jobs, right? So why would you take financial advice? Or I mean, it's different. I'm not saying don't take tax advice from a tax guy, but don't take tax strategy from a tax guy is what I'm saying. Unless you know enough to know to call them out if they're doing something right or wrong. Definitely let them do the tax forms. That's what they're supposed to do, right? But different strategy is different thing in my opinion. But again, disclaimer. You guys can do whatever you want. I'm not giving you any financial, legal, or tax advice here. But most people, I think, who make a high salary, if you can lower their adjusted gross income with deductions from real estate. They can typically make a way more or save, not pay a lot of taxes, and at the end of the day, walk away with more money and work less. It's a beautiful thing. And that's typically what I would say in majority of cases, that's the case. And the end result is the same as I mentioned, like they work less or retire earlier or find a less stressful job. And um, this is why I like what I do, because I work with people who work really hard and they save. It's the opposite. Like I don't really get these calls too much anymore from some 20-year-old kid who never went to college, who has no money, no job, and just has really big dreams of grandeur. I don't really talk to those guys anymore because somehow they kind of repel them out of the funnel at this point. But the people that I do work with are people who've worked really hard to get what they get. And, a lot of them, if you kind of look at it like running a marathon, I never ran a marathon, not much of a runner, but I think it's 37 miles long or 27. I think it's 27, final answer. But a lot of you folks run 40 miles and then you're still running. And I'm like, dude, you finished the marathon a long time ago, man. Turn in your sheet or your little tracker device and go over there and enjoy yourself. Like, here they're saying the toxic effect of loans and withdrawals. And this is geared towards the masses, right? The masses are kind of dipping out of their retirement accounts. And I think this is where a lot of even, us, we get confused because we get thrown into like, this is toxic. It's toxic. You are a sinner if you take money out of your retirement account. Don't do it. So you're like, oh yeah, I'm not going to do that, right? But, we fail to distinguish between some broke guy who is robbing 10 grand out of his retirement account to go to Vegas for the weekend. And from you who, yeah, you maybe take it out of here as a loan or you withdraw it, which I typically think is the best thing because then you get the tax benefits of the investment. But you withdraw it, but it's not like you guys are going to be going out and buying jet skis, Ferraris, or stupid stuff with the money. It might be outside your retirement labeled account, but it's still for your long-term growth over the years. So really nothing has changed. But some of the controls and the red tape has been removed. And for most people in this world, that controls and red tape creates it's just enough of a barrier for people to not just raid their retirement accounts. But again, you guys are different. So here again, like all this stuff I don't really care about. I don't really do this stuff. I mean, it's only for certain people. Very rare case that this stuff even makes sense. But they teach this stuff to you so that you can get stuck in their stuff, their retirement, or their mutual funds. The tax brackets. As I said, like, $340,000. The reason why I say that is that's when you start to get into that 35% tax bracket for married filed jointly. For some of you single guys or gals, that really starts at $170,000. So, which is not much, most single folks who are in our group are obviously the breadwinner because there's only one person in that relationship of single people. And you guys are typically making like $200,000 to $300,000 by yourselves. So you're already in this higher tax bracket. Disclosures, anything I said here, I actually, I do think this JP Morgan report that these guys came up with is a very good report. Very good charts. And I thank you guys. I hope you guys don't, complain to the YouTube gods and remove this video because I think it might be helpful for a lot of people to distinguish between the two worlds. I think for most people out there, yeah, they should invest in all these types of package retail investments. But for some people out there, you got to build a community around you. And that's why we say, get educated, listen to the podcasts, check out more of our YouTube videos, do some of our e-courses, you can get signed up at simplepassivecashflow.com/club. It's free to join. And yeah, share this with your friends and get the conversation started.